The encounter Dahlia Vega always carried three things in her utility belt. A ring of master keys that jingled softly against her hip, a small notebook filled with doodles of places she'd never been, and the weight of invisibility that came with. Being a night cleaner at Thornridge Wellness Institute, at 28, she had perfected the art of moving through spaces without disturbing them, of existing without being seen. "Remember the protocol for the West Wing, Mrs. Pembroke?" the head of housekeeping reminded her nightly.
"There'll be no entry without authorization."
Not even to dust. Dahlia nodded as she always did, collecting her cart of supplies. The West Wing housed the Institute's most exclusive patients, those wealthy or famous enough to afford complete privacy during their recovery. She had never seen these guests, only heard whispers about them from other staff members during shift changes. Tonight was different. A thunderstorm had knocked out power to sections of the sprawling estate, and Dahlia had been tasked with delivering emergency supplies to each wing. The backup generators hummed beneath her feet as she navigated the dim hallways, counting doors by the glow of her flashlight. 6, 7, 8. ... She whispered, dropping off packages of bottled water and battery-powered lamps. The rain pounded against the windows, creating shadows that danced across the marble floors. Disoriented by the darkness and the unfamiliar route, Dahlia pushed open what she thought was the supply closet. Instead of cleaning products and extra linens, she found herself in a spacious suite. Moonlight filtered through floor to ceiling, windows illuminating a grand piano in the corner and walls lined with untouched bookshelves. In the center of the room, a man sat motionless in a leather armchair, staring out at the storm. "I'm so sorry," Dahlia gasped, nearly dropping her flashlight. "I thought this was the storage room." The man didn't startle or turn. He remained perfectly still, as if he were part of the furniture. Dahlia noticed the tray of untouched food on the side table, the collection of sealed letters stacked beside it. "I'll go," she said, backing toward the door. "Please forgive the intrusion." As she turned to leave, a soft tap made her pause. Man had rapped his knuckles against the arm of his chair once, twice. When she looked back, he gestured to the emergency package she still held, cautiously. Dahlia approached and placed the supplies on the coffee table. In the blue glow of the flashlight, she could see him clearly now. Gaunt features, hollow eyes, and fingers that bore calluses she recognized from her father's hands, the marks of someone who once played music. "Do you need anything else?" she asked, though she'd been told he never spoke to anyone. He didn't answer. But his eyes tracked her movements with an alertness that contradicted his withered appearance. On impulse, Dahlia removed a small origami crane from her pocket. She folded them during breaks to pass the time and placed it beside the supplies. "For luck," she explained, though she wasn't sure why she felt compelled to leave it. During the storm, as she left, carefully shutting the door behind her, Dahlia knew she had broken protocol. What she didn't know was that the Manamet Harlow, former classical pianist whose hands hadn't touched ivory in 3 years, had picked up the paper crane. Or that for the first time since his arrival at Thornridge, he didn't immediately shred the paper that came into his possession. The next night, when Dahlia passed the West Wing on her regular rounds, she found a note slipped under the service corridor door, a torn piece of sheet music with words scrawled in the margins. "The crane survived the storm? Will you?" Paper conversations, the note became the first of many. For weeks, Dahlia found herself drawn to the forbidden corridor, slipping small tokens under Emmett's door origami animals, pressed wildflowers from the Institute's gardens, even a chocolate mint pilfered from the kitchen's dessert trays. Each offering returned with a message, written in Emmett's elegant but shaky handwriting. "The fox reminds me of a concerto I once played in Prague. All flash and sudden movements. Wildflowers don't belong inside these walls either. I haven't tasted chocolate in 847 days. Thank you." Dahlia kept every note in her journal, tucked beneath her mattress in the staff dormitory she shared with 2 other cleaners. She knew she was violating multiple protocols, not just entering the West Wing, but forming a relationship with a patient. Yet something about Emmett's isolation resonated with her own sense of being perpetually overlooked. One evening, she found the courage to write back more than just her name. "I heard you were a pianist. My father played guitar in mariachi bands. Before his hands gave out, music is the only thing he misses more than Mexico." She waited 3 nights for a reply. When it came, it was longer than usual. "I don't miss music. Music requires feeling. I removed that part of myself after the accident. Tell me about Mexico instead." "Never been so." Dahlia began writing about her childhood in Oaxaca, about the colors of the markets and the taste of her grandmother's mole sauce. She wrote about crossing the border at 16, about night classes and cleaning jobs and dreams deferred. With each letter, she revealed more of herself than she had to anyone at THORNIIDGE. Dr. Finola Wingate. The Institute's iron-willed director noticed the changes in patient 9 during her weekly evaluations. His nutrition logs showed increased food consumption. The night staff reported movement in his suite during previously inactive hours. Most significantly, he had begun accepting fresh flowers in his room, something he had violently rejected. For months after his arrival, "Has anyone unusual interacted with Mr. Harlow?" she asked the day staff, who shook their heads. Emmett maintained his silence during therapy sessions, communicating only through minimal gestures or written responses when absolutely necessary. "Perhaps it's simply time," suggested Dr. Wingate's assistant. 3 years is a long healing process, even for trauma as severe as his. But Dr. Wingate was not convinced. She installed a discreet camera in the hallway outside Emmett's suite, determined to identify the catalyst for these changes. Meanwhile, Dahlia grew bolder. One rainy night, reminiscent of their first encounter, she knocked on Emmett's door instead of just leaving a note. Long seconds passed before she heard the lock click. The door opened just enough to reveal Emmett's tall frame, thinner than she had imagined from their brief first meeting. His eyes darted past her, checking the empty hallway before he stepped aside in silent invitation. "Shouldn't be here," Dahlia whispered even as she entered. Emmett's suite was minimalist despite its grandeur. No personal items adorned the surfaces except for a stack of her notes arranged precisely on the desk. He gestured to a chair, then took his own seat at the piano bench. Though he positioned himself facing away from the instrument, he slid a notepad across the coffee table. "You're the first person I've willingly allowed in this room. Why me?" asked, her voice barely audible. Emmett wrote for several moments, his pen hesitating between thoughts. "Ash, you didn't look at me with expectation. Everyone else is waiting for me to either break completely or magically heal. You just offered a paper." Crane that night began a new ritual. Twice weekly, during the quietest hours, Dahlia would slip into Emmett's suite. They would sit in comfortable silence, sometimes exchanging written thoughts, sometimes simply existing in the same space. She brought books to read aloud, poetry, travel guides to places neither had visited, folktales from her childhood. He never spoke, but his eyes followed her movements with increasing awareness. In the staff wing, rumors circulated about patient 9. Someone had heard he was a famous musician. Another claimed he was the sole survivor of a plane crash that killed his entire family. The most persistent rumor suggested he had tried to take his own life after a public breakdown. Dahlia ignored them all, protective of the fragile connection forming between them. What she didn't know was that the security camera had captured her entering Emmett's suite, or that Dr. Wingate was now faced with a decision: intervene and potentially destroy Emmett's first sign of progress, or allow an unprecedented breach of professional boundaries to continue. After reviewing Emmett's latest medical assessments, which showed his first improvement in blood pressure and stress markers since admission, Dr. Wingate made her choice. She deleted the security footage and made a note in his file: patient exhibiting positive response to non-clinical interaction. Continue. Observation without intervention. The first word, the autumn air turned crisp as leaves fell across Thornridge's manicured grounds. Dahlia had been visiting Emmett for nearly 3 months when she arrived one evening to find him sitting at the piano. His fingers hovered above the keys without touching them, trembling slightly in the dim light. "You don't have to play," she said softly, setting down the thermos of hot chocolate she'd brought. "I never meant to pressure you." Emmett's hands retreated to his lap. He reached for his notepad, I dream of music again. That hasn't happened since before. Before what? Dahlia asked, though she had pieced together fragments of his story from careful questions and the limited information shared by other staff. Emmett stared at the blank page for so long that Dahlia thought he might not answer. Finally, he wrote, "Before I conducted the piece that killed 27 people, the revelation stole Dahlia's breath. She had heard about a concert hall collapse during a symphony performance 3 years ago, had made international news, but had never connected it to the silent man before her. I chose that venue, insisted on it, despite warnings about the renovation work. The acoustics were perfect." He continued writing, his pen pressing so hard it nearly tore the paper. "I was so consumed with creating the perfect sound that I ignored the warning signs. The ceiling collapsed during the crescendo of my composition." "That wasn't your fault," Dahlia whispered, reaching for his hand. Emmett pulled away, standing abruptly. He paced the room, hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. For the first time since they'd begun their strange friendship, Dahlia felt afraid not of him, but for him. The pain radiating from his rigid posture was almost visible. "Emmett," she said, rising to her feet. "The accident wasn't your stop." The word hung in the air between them, raspy from disuse, but unmistakable. Emmett looked as shocked as Dahlia felt, his hand rising to touch his throat. "You spoke," she breathed, tears springing to her eyes. Emmett swallowed hard, the muscles in his neck working visibly. 3 years, he said, each word emerging like a painful birth. 3 years of silence as penance. Dahlia took a cautious step toward him, and now, I don't know who I am anymore. His voice strengthened with each sentence, though it remained rough. The silence became my identity, my protection. "You're still you," Dahlia said. "Speaking doesn't change what happened or who you've become." Emmett's laugh was a broken sound. "That's the problem. I don't want to be me. The world doesn't need another Emmett Harlow composition. It needs to forget I ever existed." "I don't." "Want to forget?" Dahlia said simply. Something in her honest response seemed to deflate his anger. Emmett sank back onto the piano bench, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Why do you come here, Dahlia? What can someone like me possibly offer someone like you?" The question caught her off guard. In truth, she had never analyzed her reasons beyond the simple pull she felt toward his solitude, the quiet understanding that had developed between them. "You see me?" she finally answered. "Not just the uniform or the woman who cleans your floors. You ask about my dreams. No one has ever done that." The confession hung between them, intimate and exposing. Emmett looked at her with new intensity, as if truly seeing her for the first time. Slowly, deliberately. He placed his fingers on the piano keys. The melody that emerged was hesitant at first, a fragile thing that gained strength with each measure. Dahlia recognized it, immediately a lullaby her grandmother had sung, which she had mentioned in one of their early exchanges. Emmett had composed a variation just for her, weaving in elements that somehow captured both her heritage and her current reality. Neither noticed the door opening until a sharp gasp interrupted the music. Dr. Wingate stood frozen in the threshold, her clipboard clutched to her chest. "Mr. Harlow," she said, disbelief coloring her voice. "You're playing." The music stopped abruptly. Emmett's hands retreated to his lap, but he didn't return to silence. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." Emmett's breakthrough spread through Thornridge like wildfire. By morning, the entire staff knew that Patient 9 had spoken and played music for the first time since his admission. What they didn't know was that Dahlia had been escorted to Dr. Wingate's office immediately afterward, or that Emmett had insisted on accompanying her, refusing to let her face the consequences alone. "Your methods are unconventional, Ms. Vega," Dr. Wingate said once they were seated in her office. "And frankly, grounds for immediate termination." Before Dahlia could defend herself, Emmett spoke. "She reached me when your therapies couldn't." Dr. Wingate studied him with clinical interest. "And why do you think that is, Mr. Harlow?" "Because she had nothing to gain from my recovery," he replied, his voice growing stronger with use. "Everyone else, the doctors, my family, The board of my foundation, they all need something from me. Dahlia just offered friendship without expectation. The conversation lasted until dawn, with Dr. Wingate taking copious notes. By its conclusion, Dahlia expected to be packing her belongings. Instead, she was offered an unprecedented position, therapeutic companion. A role created specifically for her situation with Emmett. As they left the office, exhausted but relieved, Emmett whispered, "Thank you for making me speak again." Dahlia smiled. "I never asked you to. That's exactly why I did." What neither of them realized was that Dr. Wingate had already placed a call to Emmett's emergency contact, his estranged sister, Octavia Harlow, who was now booking the first flight to Thornridge after 3 years of being denied access to her brother. Difficult choice as Octavia Harlow arrived at Thornridge like a stormfront telegant, posing and charged with potential energy. Her resemblance to Emmett was striking, the same angular features and penetrating gaze, though where his eyes held shadows, hers flashed with determination. 3 years, she said upon entering his suite, where Dahlia had been helping him select books for a reading session. 3 years of quarterly reports and medical updates. 3 years of being told you refused visitors. And now I receive a call that you're speaking again to a housekeeper. Emmett flinched at his sister's tone. "Dahlia is my friend," he said, quietly but firmly. Octavia's gaze swept over Dahlia, taking in her simple clothing and the institutional badge clipped to her belt. "I'm sure she is," she replied, her tone softening slightly. "Apologize for my abruptness, Ms. Vega. It's been difficult." Dahlia nodded, acutely aware of the class divide stretching between them like a chasm. "I understand. I should give you privacy." "Stay," Emmett said, reaching for her hand. "Please." The gesture wasn't lost on Octavia, whose expression cycled through surprise and calculation before settling into careful neutrality. "Actually, I'd appreciate that. You seem to be the key to my brother's recovery, and we have much to discuss." Over the next hours, Octavia outlined the state of the Harlow Music Foundation, the charitable organization Emmett had established before the accident. Without his leadership, it had drifted from its original mission of bringing music education to underserved communities. The board was divided. Funds were being reallocated to prestigious conservatories instead of public schools. And sponsors were threatening to withdraw support. "They need you back, Emmett," Octavia concluded. "Or at least, they need your voice and your decisions." Emmett's progress regressed visibly during the conversation. He retreated to monosyllabic responses, his shoulders hunching forward as if to shield himself from expectations. Sensing his distress, Dahlia intervened. Perhaps Mr. Harlow could consider consulting remotely at first. A gradual reintroduction might be less overwhelming. Octavia studied her with new interest. "Actually, an excellent suggestion. We could arrange video conferences limited to an hour weekly." She turned to her brother. "Would that be acceptable, Emmett? Just your voice and your expertise, not your physical presence." The compromise seemed to ease some of Emmett's tension. He nodded slowly. "I can try. But I need Dahlia present during the calls." Of course, Octavia agreed, though her expression suggested she found the dependency concerning. "Dr. Wingate mentioned you've been upgraded to a therapeutic role. Ms. Vega, I assume that includes such support activities." After Octavia departed, promising to return with the necessary paperwork and technology, Emmett collapsed into his armchair. "She wants me to rejoin the world," he said, exhaustion evident in every syllable. "Is that so terrible?" Dahlia asked gently. "The world doesn't forgive people who cause disasters, Dahlia. Those families who lost loved ones in the collapse. They don't want to see me leading a foundation or conducting orchestras." "You don't know that," she countered. "People understand accidents. And your foundation helps children, surely. That counts for something." Emmett shook his head. "You haven't seen how cruel the public can be. The media, the internet. They'll crucify me if I step back into the spotlight." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Dr. Wingate entered, her expression unusually grave. "Ms. Vega, may I speak with you privately?" In the hallway, Dr. Wingate didn't mince words. "Your position here is becoming complicated." "Shh, Dahlia." Mr. Harlow's family has expressed concerns about the nature of your relationship. We're friends. Dahlia insisted. I've done nothing inappropriate. I believe you, Dr. Wingate replied. But perception matters in an institution like Thornridge. Many of our patients are public figures or come from influential families. We cannot afford even the appearance of impropriety. The implication was clear. Dahlia's continued employment depended on maintaining strict professional boundaries with Emmett. As his recovery progressed, their unique arrangement would face increasing scrutiny. Additionally, Dr. Wingate continued, we've received an interesting opportunity that may interest you. The Harlow Foundation has requested a cultural liaison for their Latin American music education initiative. Given your background and Mr. Harlow's trust in you, Ms. Octavia Harlow suggested you might be an ideal candidate. The offer stunned Dahlia. It represented everything she had ever wanted, meaningful work, recognition of her cultural knowledge, a salary that would allow her to bring her father to the United States for medical treatment. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it was also a sophisticated attempt to separate her from Emmett while maintaining the appearance of generosity. I need time to consider, she said finally. When she returned to Emmett's suite, she found him at the piano again, playing a melancholy piece she didn't recognize. That's beautiful, she said, sitting beside him on the bench. Your composition? Yes, he admitted. I'm calling it Paper Conversations. It's about us. The simple statement made her heart constrict. Emmett, we need to talk about what happens. Next he continued playing, the melody growing more complex. They want to separate us, don't they? My sister, the doctors, they see our connection as a problem to solve. They've offered me a job with your foundation, Dahlia confessed. Working with music education programs in Latin America. Emmett's hands stilled on the keys. Will you take it? I don't know, she answered honestly. It's an incredible opportunity. You should accept, he said after a long pause. You deserve recognition for your talents, Dahlia. Not just as my ... whatever they're calling you now. And what about us? She asked, the question emerging before she could reconsider. Emmett turned to face her fully. There can't be an us while I'm still a patient here and you're employed. By Thornridge, we both know that. Truth hung between them, unavoidable and painful. Whatever had grown between them existed in a bubble, protected by the unique circumstances of their meeting. In the real world, with its power dynamics and social hierarchies, their connection would face obstacles neither was prepared to navigate. So, this is goodbye? Dahlia asked, hating how her voice trembled. Emmett took her hand, his touch conveying what words couldn't.
No,
He said firmly, this is an intermission. The music will continue, Dahlia. I promise you that. Beyond the walls, spring came to Thornridge with an explosion of color. Cherry blossoms lined the entrance drive, their petals creating pale pink snowdrifts that danced in the April breeze. Dahlia watched them from the window of her new office. In the administrative wing, where she'd been relocated after accepting the position with the Harlow Foundation, 6 months had passed since her last private conversation with Emmett. Their interactions were now limited to formal sessions therapy, music practice, foundation business, always under supervision, always within the strict boundaries established by Dr. Wingate and Octavia. Emmett had made remarkable progress. He spoke regularly, participated in group activities, and had even begun composing again. His new work focused on themes of healing and rebirth, deliberately structured to be performed in open spaces rather than enclosed concert halls. The foundation was thriving under his renewed guidance. With Dahlia's cultural outreach program garnering particular praise from the board, to all external observers, their professional collaboration was a success story, the reclusive maestro, and the intuitive therapist who had facilitated his return to the world. Only Dahlia felt the hollow ache of what remained unspoken between them, the conversations now limited to clinical spaces and supervised settings. Today marked a significant milestone, Emmett's discharge evaluation. After nearly 4 years at Thornridge, he had been deemed ready to re-enter society. Dahlia had not been invited to the assessment, a pointed reminder of her complicated position. Her phone chimed with a message from Octavia. Decision made. Emmett leaving tomorrow? Wants to see you before departure? My office, 3 p.m. Dahlia's heart raced as she made her way across the grounds. Despite their professional interactions, she and Emmett had never discussed that final intense conversation in his suite. The promise of music continuing had sustained her through months of carefully maintained distance. Octavia's office reflected her personality, elegant but severe, with awards and credentials displayed prominently behind her desk. Emmett waited alone, standing by the window in a tailored suit that emphasized how much weight he had regained. During his recovery, "Dahlia," he said, turning at the sound of the door. "Thank you for coming. Congratulations on your discharge," she replied, maintaining a professional distance. "The Foundation team is excited to have you join the headquarters." In person, Emmett smiled, seeing through her formality. "Always so careful now. I miss your honesty." "What did you want to discuss, Mr. Harlow?" she asked, trying to ignore the pull she still felt toward him. He approached slowly, respectful of the boundaries that had been established between them. "I'm leaving Thornridge tomorrow, returning to New York to resume my responsibilities." "I know," she said. "The Latin American initiative launches next month. I've been preparing the presentations for the donors." "And will you be delivering those presentations in person?" he asked. "In New York?" The question caught her off guard. "I assumed I would continue coordinating from here. My position is based at Thornridge." Emmett shook his head. "That was a temporary arrangement until my discharge. The Foundation headquarters is in Manhattan. As Director of Cultural Outreach, your presence will be required there." "I don't understand," Dahlia said, confusion evident in her voice. "I haven't received any transfer notices?" "Okay, because I wanted to ask you personally," Emmett replied. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. "This is a formal offer of employment directly with the Harlow Foundation, not as a Thornridge liaison." Dahlia stared at the envelope, understanding its significance. "And if I accept, then we would be colleagues." Equals. Emmett's gaze held hers steadily. No more supervised interactions. No more institutional protocols. The implications hung in the air between them. Dahlia thought of all she had built at Thornridge, the security, the routine, the safety of defined relationships. Moving to New York meant uncertainty, navigating a world far removed from her experience. "I need time to consider," she said, echoing her response from months earlier. Emmett nodded, disappointment flickering across his features. "Of course, the position remains open for 2 weeks." He turned to leave, then hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, Dahlia, the music never stopped for me. Even during our intermission." After he departed, Dahlia opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The salary figure made her gasp. It would allow her to support her entire family, not just her father. The position description highlighted her cultural knowledge and interpersonal skills, presenting her background as an asset rather than a limitation. Unreadable. "I see Mr. Harlow has made his offer," she remarked, taking a seat across from Dahlia. "May I speak candidly?" Dahlia nodded, bracing herself for objections. "You've accomplished something remarkable here," Dr. Wingate said, surprising her. "You first entered Emmett Harlow's room that stormy night. You violated every protocol we have." "I should have fired you immediately. Why didn't you?" Dahlia asked, a question that had lingered for months. Dr. Wingate smiled wryly. "Because I've been in this field for 30 years, and I've learned that healing rarely follows institutional guidelines. Sometimes a connection forms that transcends our clinical understanding." She leaned forward. "You gave Emmett something no therapy could provide: recognition of his humanity beyond his trauma. Are you saying I should accept the position?" Dahlia asked, uncertain of Dr. Wingate's intent. "I'm saying you should recognize your own worth," she replied. "Your intuitive understanding of trauma and recovery isn't something we taught you. It's innate. You could have a future in this field, with proper training. Are you offering me a different position?" Dr. Wingate nodded. "At Thornridge would sponsor your education, psychology, counseling, whatever path interests you. You could remain here, build on the foundation you've established." 2 paths lay before her: the security of Thornridge, with its familiar rhythms and professional development opportunities, or the uncertainty of New York, working alongside Emmett as they explored whatever remained of their connection. 3 days later, Dahlia stood on the Thornridge entrance drive, watching cherry blossoms swirl around her single suitcase. Dr. Wingate had accepted her resignation with understanding, distracting only one promise, that Dahlia would continue her education. In New York, with the Harlow Foundation covering the expenses, a sleek black car approached, stopping before her. The driver emerged to take her luggage, and the rear door opened to reveal Emmett, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "You came," he said simply. Dahlia smiled, taking her first step toward a future neither of them could have imagined that stormy night. "The music continues," she replied, sliding into the seat beside him. As the car pulled away from Thornridge, Emmett reached for her hand. "I want you to know something," he said seriously. Whatever happens between us personally or professionally, or position with the foundation is secure. Your talent stands on its own merit." Dahlia squeezed his hand in response. "I never doubted that," she said, "but thank you for saying it." The cherry blossoms gave way to open road, then to the distant skyline of the city where both would begin again, and as patient and cleaner. Not as broken maestro and silent confidant, but as two people who had found each other in the spaces between tragedy and healing. "I've been composing something new," Emmett said as they approached the city. "A piece about boundaries crossed and silences broken. Would you like to hear it when we arrive?" "Yes," Dahlia replied, watching the world expand before them. "I would. Like that very much." The car continued toward the horizon, carrying them beyond the walls that had both confined and connected them, to a future neither could have imagined when a wrong door opened on a stormy night.